What would you do if both engines on your plane suddenly died at 41,000 feet and you had no power, no thrust, just silence? That's exactly what happened to Air Canada Flight 143 in 1983. And what followed was one of the greatest gliding miracles in aviation history. On July 23, 1983, 69 passengers boarded a brand new Boeing 767 in Montreal. Destination: Edmonton. A routine domestic flight, or so it seemed. But hidden inside this aircraft was a small mistake, a math error that would nearly bring down a jetliner and forever change airline procedures. That morning, the airplane's fuel gauge system wasn't working properly, so the crew had to measure the fuel manually, using a dipstick called a dripstick and a simple conversion chart. The new Boeing 767 used the metric system, calculating fuel in kilograms. But on the ground, crews were still used to pounds from the older imperial system. And here's where everything went wrong. They used the wrong conversion factor, 1.77 pounds per liter, thinking it was 1.77 kilograms per liter. That single misunderstanding cut their actual fuel load by more than half. They took off with only 10,000 kilograms of fuel, when they needed over 22,000. The flight took off smoothly from Montreal, stopped briefly in Ottawa, and climbed to cruising altitude, 41,000 feet. Everything felt routine. Passengers settled in. But 90 minutes later, the warning lights began flashing. First, the left engine lost power. Then, seconds later, the right engine flamed out. The Boeing 767, one of the most advanced jets of its time, suddenly became a 130-ton glider. In the cockpit were Captain Robert Pearson and First Officer Maurice Quintal. Pearson was not just a pilot, he was also a glider enthusiast. That experience would soon save 69 lives. As the engines shut down, so did the main power and most instruments. The cockpit went nearly dark. The hydraulic systems that control the plane's flaps and steering were powered by those same engines. Yet, the 767 wasn't completely helpless. Pearson used gravity, lowering the nose to maintain airspeed, keeping just enough control to glide. At 41,000 feet, they had roughly 17 minutes before impact. They needed to find somewhere, anywhere, to land. First Officer Quintal remembered a decommissioned airbase at a place called Gimli in Manitoba. Problem? It wasn't an airport anymore. It had been converted into a racetrack. Still, it was their only shot. They aimed for Gimli, using a glide ratio of 12:1, losing 1 mile of altitude for every 12 miles forward. But the math was tight. Too tight. To stretch the glide, Pearson used advanced glider tricks, side-slipping to control speed and distance, all without engines. Down below, a car race was underway on the old runway. Families, children, even cyclists. No one expected a silent jetliner to drop from the sky. Pearson lined up the approach perfectly, but without engine power, there was no thrust to flare the landing. The front landing gear collapsed, and the jet scraped along the runway in a shower of sparks. Miraculously, it came to a stop. There were no fatalities, only minor injuries. And that's how a 132-ton airliner landed without engines, without fuel, and without fatalities, earning the nickname, the Gimli Glider. The investigation revealed exactly how the mix-up happened. A simple metric to imperial conversion error. The crew used 1.77 pounds per liter instead of 0.803 kilograms per liter. The result? Less than half the required fuel on board. Air Canada overhauled its fueling and maintenance procedures immediately. Metric standards were reinforced across the fleet. Captain Pearson and First Officer Quintal were initially disciplined, but later celebrated for their extraordinary airmanship. To this day, pilots around the world study Flight 143 as a textbook example of human error, quick thinking, and teamwork under pressure. A small math mistake nearly caused disaster, but skill, calm, and courage turned it into a miracle. If this story amazed you, imagine what happens when technology fails, and only human instinct remains. This is Aircraft, where we explore the stories behind the skies. Subscribe now, hit the bell icon, and join us next week for another unbelievable true story from aviation history.